In today's video, we're going to update our AI voice assistant to handle multiple chats at the same time. So let's get started. Hello everyone, this is Marco speaking. In the previous videos, we developed our AI voice assistant. And this is what it looks like right now. A user, let's suppose for example user 1. User 1 with his computer access the front end, and the front end with the voice from user 1 will be sent to the backend. And so the backend will process the audio request from the user 1 and send it back to the front end. But let's suppose now we have a second user. Let's call it user 2. So let's suppose that now user 2 will also try to use our AI voice assistant, and user 2 will send a request, will send a message using the front end to the back end. But here's the thing, there's no way on our current design for the back end to know where the audio came from. So if user 1 and user 2 and other users tries to access the back end, there's no way for the back end to know where the audio came from, which is exactly the issue we're going to address in the current video. So let's get into it. Okay, great. So this is what we developed previously. This is the front end, and this is our code base. So for now, we're going to update our front end. So this is the index file. So let's go to our voice assistant component, and here on the voice assistant, let's go to the use voice assistant. And the first thing that we're going to do is to install the UUID library to the code base. So I'm going to open up here another terminal. And then here, let's go to the front end. And then let's install the yarn UUID library. UUID. Perfect. Now here on the use voice assistant, I'm going to import the version 4 of UUID. That's it. Now let's install the types from UUID so the code can recognize the types since we're using TypeScript. So I'm gonna do yarn add the types and then --var dev. Perfect. Now the code base can recognize the library and the proper types for it. So let's add here another state. So const equals use state, and then the initial state will be the version 4 for UUID. So here we are basically generating a simple ID, which is the version 4 from which is a random UUID using UUID version 4. So let's call it user ID, and we're not going to use the set user ID, so I'm just going to pass this. Perfect. So what else we need to do here on this get AI reply output? Let's update the code. So we're going to pass here the user ID as well, which is a string. And then on our form data, we're going to do form data dot append, and then we're going to pass the user ID and here the user ID. Perfect. So on the previous function, when we're calling the get AI reply output, we pass the user audio data, which is the blob with the voice captured from the browser, and our user ID. Perfect. And that's pretty much it. This is all we need to change on the front end. We basically generated a random UUID for the user, which we call the user ID, and then we pass it here, and then here we pass this user ID to the get AI reply output, and then here, that's it. And then it goes here to this function, and then this user ID goes to the form data, and the form data we send to the backend. Perfect. Now let's update our backend. Okay, perfect. So this is the backend, and this is the controller layer, which receives the audio data from the front end. So here you can see that we have the file, which is the blob data sent by the front end to the back end. So what we need to do here to update the code to receive the user ID as well. So for receiving the user ID, we pretty much need to pass a second argument with the same name as the front end. So since we define as user ID, you have to pay attention to the case. It needs to follow the same case as you defined on the front end. So user ID, I'm gonna pass here string equals a form, and then this is the syntax for fast API, and then here we need to import the form library from fast API. Perfect. So this is the user ID sent from the front end. So let's make a quick demonstration here. So I'm going to print the user ID. Let's see if the user ID was properly sent from the front end to the back end. Let me restart the server so Fast API can read the changes. Perfect. Now let's go back to the front end and make a simple demonstration. So, hello, who are you?
Hello. I am an AI language model developed by OpenAI. My purpose is to assist and provide information on a wide range of topics. How can I help you today?
Perfect. Now let's go back to the backend and let's see our logs. So these are our logs. So here you can see the file data, which is the upload file, and our user ID. As you can see, the user ID is a UUID that we defined on the front end. Perfect. Now we need to pass this user ID to the next layers of the code base. So let's update our service layer. So here we already received the bytes object, which is the blob file. Now let's pass our user ID as well. User ID is a string. Perfect. Now here on the controller, we pass our user ID, which is our user ID. Now let's go back to the service again, and we pretty much need to change now the layer which mounts the chat history. So here we have the user ID. So if you remember well, the first step is to transcode the audio. The next step is to transcribe the audio to extract the text from the audio here in these two lines. And here on this AI text reply is where we actually send out the user text to the AI model. So here on the handle get response for user, which is the layer responsible to interact with OpenAI models. So on the handle get response for user, we're passing the user prompt, but now we need to pass the user ID as well. User ID is a string. Perfect. And here we pass the user ID. So you can see here that there's a conversation chain being mounted for the LLM here. And this is the code we need to change. So if you see here, we have this chat memory object, which is a conversation buffer memory. So what we're going to do, we're basically, for now, we're going to create a dict object, so on this dict object, the key will be the user ID and the value will be a chat history. So for every user ID, we're gonna have a unique chat history. So let's define a function to do that. Def get chat memory per user. Perfect. So now we pass the user ID as the input parameter, which is a string. For now, we're just gonna pass. So let's comment this line. It's complaining here, but don't worry about it. So what we're going to do here, chat memory, we're going to define a new object. We're going to call it chat memory per user. For now, it's going to be a dictionary. an empty dictionary. So what we're going to do here on this function, we're going to check if user ID and the chat memory per user, we basically return the chat memory for the current user, chat memory per user, and then we pass on the user ID. Otherwise, what we're going to do on chat memory per user, on the user ID, we'll receive a new conversation buffer memory. You can actually do it this way. New memory equals to the conversation buffer memory. So the chat memory per user on the user ID will receive the new memory, and we also return the new memory. Perfect. So here on this function, on the original function, we're gonna define the chat memory to be the get chat memory per user, and then here we pass the user ID. And that's pretty much it. Now we updated the code to handle different chat histories for different users, because every chat history will be an entry on this dictionary. You know what? Let's make an experiment here. So we have this small CLI application to test it out our chat service. So what we're going to do here, we're going to define two different users. So we're going to say, for example, user ID 1 equals to, I don't know, for example, like, doesn't need to be in UUID. Let's say, like, for example, 1, 2, 3. And the user ID 2 will be 4, 5, 6. As long as the string is unique, we're not going to have a trouble. So before the user prompt, we're going to have like the user ID will be what? It's going to be user ID 1 if the input prompt so let's ask, for example, 1 for user ID 1, anything else for user ID 2. Perfect. So if the user passes, so if the user input is equals to 1, we're gonna pass the user ID 1. Otherwise, we're gonna pass user ID 2. Perfect. So, and then we pass this user ID to the previous function. So this is our small CLI. So here we define two different user IDs. So here on this while true, the first thing we ask for which user you want to use. So for example, if the user says 1, we're going to use the user ID 1. Anything else, we're going to use user ID 2. And then we ask the actual prompt from the user. And then here, we get the response from the OpenAI model. So let's run this to test it out. So I'm going to use user ID 1. So I'm going to ask, like, for the first user, what do you think about Superman? So this is the answer from the AI model. Superman is a fascinating character, and blah blah blah. So now let's use the second user. So I'm gonna pass 2. I'm gonna ask, using the second user, what do you think about Spider-Man? So he's talking about Spider-Man. Oh, Spider-Man, he's one of the most iconic superheroes in popular culture, and blah blah blah. So you see that on user 1, I asked about Superman, and user ID 2, I asked about Spider-Man. So I'm gonna use user ID 1 again and ask for the last question. So we should say that I asked about Superman because I'm using user ID 1. What was my last question to you? So you see that your last question to me was, what do you think about Superman? Perfect. Now let's try the same thing using user ID 2. So I'm gonna say user ID 2, and I'm gonna ask the same thing. What was my last question to you? Your last question to me was, what do you think about Spider-Man? Perfect. So, and that's it. As you can see now, we can handle different users in our application. I hope you liked it, and I see you in the next time.